What's going on, guys? I'm the Philosopher, and today is the first time where I'm actually going to do a live episode of FGC Philosophy. Something I've been wanting to do a lot is talking about topics that are really important to me and diving a little bit deeper on how they're relevant to fighting games, how they're relevant to just life in general, and some tips on how to overcome some of these barriers, these issues, these concepts that I'm going to be talking about. First topic is decision fatigue. First, we're going to be talking about what is decision fatigue. That's going to be the most important topic so that we can get to where we need to go. Then I'm going to talk about how it might show up in fighting games, and then I'm going to share you 5 tips that will help you in and out of fighting games. First off, what is this elusive decision fatigue? The definition that if you look it up, would be the deteriorating quality of decisions made after a long session of decision making. And if you play fighting games, you know there's tons of decisions to be made. So already off the bat, we got a link between this definition and what's going on in fighting games. But this can be throughout your day. It can be throughout a certain period of time, and basically it's just your ability to make good decisions. It just declines over time. So your inhibitions, you give in to more inhibitions. So for example, outside of fighting games, if you are trying to be on a diet, if you're trying to eat better, and you have a job where you're making a bunch of decisions, or you put yourself in a situation where you're not making the best decisions, or you're on your phone a lot and you're scrolling through YouTube or Facebook deciding on whether or not you want to look at these posts and interact with them and doing all these things, because these are decisions that we're making when we're looking at our phone and scrolling on whether or not we want to interact with it. We're putting ourselves in a situation where we are making choices. After you get off of work, you go home and you're like, what do I want to eat? And you have this internal dialogue about, what do I want to eat? What do I want to do? Do I want to go to the gym? And you're having all these thoughts in your head. And so you go and do the easier thing. I'm just going to go get some fast food. I'm just going to go home and watch some TV, and I'm going to eat the food and watch some TV rather than going to the gym and eating something healthy, because as is too much right now. I'm tired. I don't want to do it. That's basically what decision fatigue is. To help you guys understand how much of an impact this is, there was a study done in I don't remember the location, but there was a study done with these parole judgments. These judges would decide whether or not someone was going to be free that day or within a certain given amount of time. And what they found was very interesting. Certain things like race or their story or their crime wasn't the deciding factor in what got them to be released. It was actually the time of day. They found that more often than not, the judge would actually deny their parole as the day went on, because they're making more and more of these decisions. So you're more likely to get on parole if you have a judgment that is earlier in the day. So very fascinating, very real life scenario that affects people without us even knowing. So it happens in real life. So you can kind of see how this might pop up in fighting games. But let's go over that. From what I've observed, and these are things that I observed personally, there's some topics on there as well, but I just want to talk about, from my point of view, what I've seen and what I think might be some effects of decision fatigue. So the first thing is kind of going through the motions of playing the game. You might know this as autopiloting. This affects players in a bunch of different ways, but essentially, you start to play more predictable, and then you start doing the same things over and over again. You're not really having much strategy to what you're doing. You're having a hard time predicting what they're going to do. You're just kind of playing the game and pressing some buttons based off of what you might know. And the less experienced you are, the worse chance you have of actually winning. So that's the first thing that I've noticed. The second thing is actually playing passively or defensively. So you kind of turtle up, because you're sitting there trying to think about what you want to do. You're trying to decide, is this going to work? No, I don't know if I can do that. I got to find that situation. You're looking for these specific things, but not really realizing you're not in the present moment. You're looking for this opportunity, but you're not really paying attention to what the opponent's doing now. And that jump in that you're fishing for may never happen because you don't do the other things to create that scenario. And then when it finally does happen, you just get bopped in the face and you missed your opportunity to jump in. Basically, you're shutting down, you're feeling overwhelmed. You have this sense of you don't know what to do. That's number 2 that I've observed with decision fatigue and how that might affect players. There's a couple of other contributors, but specifically to what I'm talking about, these are the things. The next topic would be making poor or unsafe choices, high risk, low reward. You are doing things that you might see this as the over aggressive player. Sometimes this might happen, maybe not necessarily you're frustrated from the game itself, but just as your day has gone on and as you've played more and more matches, your ability to make the best choices in any given moment is kind of declining. Kind of like what I talked about with getting the junk food instead of eating healthy. This is basically you wake up DPing 50% of the time, you get knocked down. It's going to get very predictable, like the topic before, but this is more so just making a bad decision, making these high risk, low reward situations and putting yourself in them on a very often basis. Often scenario? I don't know. Whatever. Moving on. The last thing, kind of like the other one, is just in general playing aggressive. You're not necessarily just throwing out unsafe things, but you're just throwing out frame traps and doing all these things, but you're not really paying attention to what your opponent's doing. So you're just going at the opponent and pressing as many buttons as you can. And so they're not necessarily high risk, low reward. But I mean, if you just keep pressing out buttons, they basically are, because you can get crush countered at any given moment. If you are doing more than one of these things, just one of these things, honestly, you can get punished very badly. And so there's tons of other examples, but I think that gives you an idea of how making choices could affect you in a multitude of different ways. I think there's more, and I want to explore that. And I actually plan on having a conversation with Joe Monday about this topic, but I wanted to get this out to the public first to kind of talk about the ideas that I have, and then hopefully make the podcast that I do with him a little bit more enriching as well. Hopefully the conversation will be elevated as a result of me doing some research and getting these ideas out of my head. The next idea I want to talk about is just the 5 tips that I have to help you minimize decision fatigue. I think a lot of these topics are helpful in and out of fighting games. That's basically what I do. But number 1 is chunking, or chunking information, or chunking your choices. That sounds kind of funny. I like the way that sounds. Chunking your choices. If you don't understand the concept of chunking, it is the idea that you take like information and you mush it together so that you don't have to think as much about the situation. A lot of people do this in chess. You have a certain formation on the board, and a master will see a lot less going on than what a new person or even an experienced person will see, because they've chunked down the information. They know that there's a certain number of moves that would happen in order for them to be able to win. Rather than just seeing one move at a time, they see this formation of the screen. There's a really good book. I talk about it pretty often. It's called The Art of Learning by Josh Whiteskin. He's the person who the movie Searching for Robbie Fisher was based off of, the book in the movie. Really great chess grandmaster that also transferred to martial arts and became a grandmaster or a world champion of Tai Chi Chuan push hands. So he took the philosophy of chunking information, applied it to martial arts, and kicked ass at that, literally and metaphorically. How to apply that to fighting games? Something like frame data, which is very overwhelming to the new person. I don't think that you need to remember every single number that happens. What I recommend you doing is chunking that information to punishable, safe, and then advantage. So at any given moment, if you press a button and they block it, are you punishable? Are you safe? Or do you have advantage? Because those are the 3 things that affect what you do next. If you're punishable, then your opponent should punish you if they know that this is punishable. If they don't punish you, then that might mean that they either weren't ready or they don't know that that button's punishable. That's information. If it's safe, then you block. It's easy. If they don't press a button, perhaps next time you can choose to force your next turn, steal your turn. Or if you're plus on block or advantage, you press a button that would either create a frame trap or continue your block string. So those are the 3 things. You don't need to know -1, -8, +7. You don't need to know those things. You just need to know those 3 basic forms of information. So you chunk down all these numbers and you basically take every move that you have and put them in those 3 categories. It makes it a lot simpler so that when you see a move, you can kind of log it into your head. Okay, that's punishable. I know that. Okay, that's safe. I need to block after that, or whatever. So that's one way that you can use chunking. There's a ton of different ways, and I encourage you guys to explore that concept on your own and definitely share with me, because I don't know it all. How do you chunk your information? How do you condense fighting games? Let me know. Number 2 is plan ahead of time. You know what character you're going to play, so you should have some sort of strategy. And this is something that evolves just like your execution over time, and you add more to it, you add layers, and you understand the other opponents. So if you do this, you're going to combat autopiloting because you're going to have some sort of structure. It gives you something to walk in with so that you already have choices pre-made. It's like laying out your gym clothes the day before. You don't have to think about the gym clothes and what you're going to wear because it's already there. You don't have to question it. You know, you lay out your work clothes. You're not sitting there in the morning for 15 minutes figuring out, I don't want to wear that one today. No, I wore that last week. You don't have to do any of that. You already picked it the day before. You just put it on and you go. Just like with having a plan of some sort, you do it and you adjust accordingly depending on what's going on. Pretty simple stuff. So you have the muscle memory and you have the strategy, so now it's there. So which is number 3, creating your muscle memory in areas where you are weak. If you're bad at anti-airing, then you anti-air more. You go into training and you create that muscle memory, because when you create muscle memory in areas that you are weak in, or just in general, you are reducing the amount of energy required when you are put in a situation where you have to do those things. That is literal energy that you're expending when you have muscle memory, or when you're doing something, when you're making a choice. That is like pulling from your mental health bar. So when you make things muscle memory, you are able to reach a higher level where you're not using as much energy doing these things because it's automatic. It's like a reflex. You don't have to think about walking, you just walk. You don't have to think about breathing, you just breathe. Same concept. It's super useful. Number 4 is minimizing the choices that you make. And this is very good to go with chunking, but it's a different idea. Maybe I could word it a little bit better. But what I mean is try doing just one thing at a time. So say you don't know if something's safe or not. You didn't do that research, and now you're in a situation where you're playing a character and you don't know if it's safe. Or you're in a lab and you don't feel like looking up frame data. You can do a couple of things. You can try to press a button and see if you get a punish for it. You know, you can do a move, test it out, or throw a move out there and block and see if you get punished for that. If you get hit and you're blocking, then obviously it's punishable. Test out new ideas, but do one specific thing. Don't try to just do everything at once. Just test out things and be willing to lose in order to learn. That's really, really important. And that's kind of a side, like a runner-up that I actually want to add is just being willing to lose to learn. Focus on learning rather than winning, because you're going to get better if you are taking losses but doing it intentionally. The last one is very, very important for a multitude of reasons, but it's get some sleep. Get 6 to 8 hours of sleep depending on how you function on a regular basis, not one day a week, but on a consistent basis, because your body needs time to recover, your mind needs time to recover, and you can't get around that. And the older you get, the harder it is to do that. But even when you're young, you aren't going to be as optimal if you're not getting your sleep. Your body needs to rest. And if you don't, then your likelihood of being fatigued by decisions is going to be a lot higher at the beginning of your day. So you're already at a deficit at the start of your day. So why give yourself a disadvantage right off the bat? Just get some sleep, utilize your time better, plan ahead. It's going to do you a lot of justice, a lot of service, if you go ahead and do this. I can't stress that one enough. It has nothing to do with just fighting games, but it's really, really important. So I gotta throw it in there. So to recap, decision fatigue, it's the inability to make optimal choices. Really important to understand that concept. Decision fatigue is caused by making a bunch of decisions over a period of time, whether it be over a day or over like an hour playing a bunch of sets and fighting games against other really good players, or you not utilizing your choices very optimally, effectively, efficiently, whatever you want to call it. Remember my top 5 tips for reducing decision fatigue. Can't say the word, decision fatigue. It's chunking, planning, creating muscle memory, reducing the amount of choices that you make, and then getting a good night's rest. All these things are super duper important in my opinion. There's tons more, and I have more content coming up on this topic. So that said, I'm gonna get out of here. If you guys are watching the YouTube version of this, thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know what you think down below and how decision fatigue has affected you and what you're going to do to reduce it. Other than that, I have to thank my patrons for making everything happen. I've definitely been able to do so much more because of Patreon. So if you guys want to consider supporting me on Patreon, even as little as $1 a month goes a long way. So check the description below for the link. Otherwise, make sure you like, share, and subscribe for more content from FGC Philosophy. I'm tired, I'm sorry. I will see you guys in the next one.